Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin here with my co-host James Haskell, and we have an exciting episode for you this morning, announcing a new Raven to the squad. Right. But before we get into it, if you want to give us a subscribe and a like, keep you up to date on all the Ravens breaking news. But Jimmy, why don't you break this news? It's an exciting day.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin Zeitler, the former guard from the most recently New York Giants, but also I believe was previously on the Cincinnati Bengals, has now signed to be a Baltimore Ravens. So he's coming back to the AFC North on a 3-year deal, $22 million in total, $16 million guaranteed, and 7.5 right now is what we've seen from the annual breakdown as far as we can gather. He is a right guard, just to distinguish between the two, and my initial thoughts, Glenn, is that he's durable. He's a former first round pick. Has all of the physical attributes, has the know-how, the understanding of what it takes to play in the division, and is a lock at right guard. I don't think there's any more question marks, barring health, at right guard at this point. What were your initial thoughts when you saw the deal? Oh, and one other thing, he doesn't count against the compensatory formula because he was released by the Giants, which honestly I think is the only way the Ravens will sign free agents this offseason, with the amount of guys that are being cut, have been cut, and will be cut.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can definitely look when you're looking at potential free agents. I guess we should just narrow that list down to players that were released.
Definitely this year.
Yeah, because with the shortage of picks, they don't want to risk losing any other ones. So, well, let me just say this: he's 6'4", he's 315, and he came from Wisconsin. So, I mean, what else needs to be said? I mean, they pump out offensive linemen like almost nobody else. But yeah, so the first thing I thought of, I was a little surprised. I was surprised that they decided to address guard first rather than center.
Yeah.
And I know Orlando's here right now, but they still haven't addressed right tackle, and I expect him to be gone. But man, I mean, excited though. I mean, my goodness, it looks like the Ravens are definitely building from within to get this offense back on track. I think the loss of Marshall Yanda maybe hurt a little bit more. I mean, I'm sure that they anticipated it hurting. I mean, you're losing a Hall of Famer, but I think it may have hurt a little more than they even thought. And they'd certainly address this. This guy isn't Marshall Yanda, but he's a Pro Bowl guard. And you don't have to worry about a guy that can only do one thing on the in that position. Now, I know Powers was pretty good as a run blocker, but he really struggled as pass block. Well, this guy can do both, and more importantly, he's a perfect schematic fit. I was reading an article written by Doug Farrar from Touchdown Wire, and he pointed out that the Ravens run a gap blocking scheme that they ask their guards to pull a lot. We've talked many times on the show about that's why we think Bozeman hasn't been moved to center, because he's so good as a pulling guard. We had a guard pulling on 245 snaps last season, which was a league lead by far. And they gained 1,500 yards off of those plays, including 672 yards after contact and 13 rushing touchdowns, Jimbo. So they like to pull their guards quite a lot in Baltimore. Well, the Giants similarly like to do the same. They had 125 snaps in which they pulled their guard for 552 yards and just one touchdown. But, of course, as the article points out, they don't have Lamar Jackson. They don't have the stable of running backs after Saquon goes down. They don't have, this offensive system. So I think he's even going to be more valuable here. So it just seems like he's a perfect schematic fit. And then I look at his, we talked about the pressure that Lamar was under in the playoffs last year. Well, he allowed just 2 sacks last year on 28 pressures in 630 pass blocking snaps. And that's with Danny Dimes and Colt McCoy, like who's at quarterback for them. So, I mean, this is a perfect fit, perfect move. And I'm glad that they're building from within.
Yeah, it's just another example of the Ravens going a layer deeper in their analysis when they're finding their fit, right? Because you and I have put together that list of offensive linemen, and funny enough that like we didn't even bring this guy up, and it wasn't because of lack of talent or anything like that. But the one thing that I think, and obviously rightfully so, the Ravens did that was really smart is, and I feel like we did this a little bit, but I feel like they took it to the next level when you were talking about the fit and the pulling, schematically being able to pull and being effective at that. it really, it lessens the learning curve for a complex running system like Greg Roman that he has, of course. And so it's just another example of the Ravens honing in on their guy, going after him, getting for the right price. Because think about this. A couple of guys that we named yesterday, Thuney's price is what? Is it
13?
I thought it was 14 and a half.
It may have been. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was like 14.75. I mean, it's up there, right? We get this guy for 7.5 a year.
Crazy. I mean, how'd they get him for such a good deal? And it's not like a 1-year deal. This is a 3-year deal where he's locked up through. I mean, as a lineman, I would say this is maybe his prime years, his low 30s nowadays. I mean, you're not going to ever surprise the guy. He's seen it all, done it all. Yeah, I mean, I think this is it. And you mentioned it, and I just want to double down on the fact that this is such a complex scheme, a scheme that not a lot of teams are out there are practicing or implementing even parts of it, much less the whole thing. But Zeitler has experience in a similar scheme as far as a run blocking fit. So, I mean, it just seemed. But let me ask you this, Jimmy. What does this mean? What does this signing mean for guys like not Fluker, Bredesen, Powers, Phillips? What does this mean for those guys that were looking to compete for that job?
Well, I think they're actually all in different buckets because. And that's kind of what I was going to ask you is it's still kind of up in the air where it leaves us on the offensive line because we'll assume he plugs in at right guard, right? And for now, we'll say Orlando's at right tackle, Stanley's at left tackle. But really what, and you said it, maybe the reason they're keeping Bozeman at left guard is because he's such a good pulling guard, but we don't really know if their option for center. I think it will all come down to how free agency ends up and how the draft goes because, in regards to those guys you mentioned, I think Phillips needs time to develop and learn behind a guy like Zeitler. Maybe they learned that last year. And that's okay, right? He's so young in football where he only played 1 year of high school football, which is pretty incredible. But the other guys, it really depends on whether or not Bozeman goes in at center or if they keep him at left guard. And then if they don't, is Bredesen going to get a shot at center? Right. You know what I mean? Is that so? There's still a lot of question marks there. And I think it's a good point that you bring up. The only interesting thing about this signing is that they didn't address the center position, which seems to us to be a little more urgent than the guards. Not that the right guard wasn't a need. It definitely was. But it seemed like as far as priorities go, at least to us, I think center was a little higher. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw a horror story in that playoff game, Lamar getting hurt.
Yeah.
And Macari, I think ideally would just be that sixth guy that can play pretty much anywhere because he has pretty much played everywhere on the offensive line. So I don't think they want to go into the season with him as their starter, no doubt.
Yeah. The one guy I would say that it leaves out to dry the most based on the years he's been in the league is Powers.
Yeah. He's going to struggle to make the roster, is he not?
Right, because Bredesen is only going to his second year without an offseason. Same thing with Tyree Phillips. So potentially we've seen a couple lineups in practice where Bredesen is at center, so he might have some more versatility where Powers doesn't seem to have it. And Powers is now going into his third year. Yeah, as a 4th-round pick, of course, by the heralded and legend Mo Gaba. So certainly, and of course, Tyree Phillips, same thing. He's a developmental guy going into his second year, who I think surprised some people at the beginning of the year last year, but still definitely needs time to develop.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, Powers to me, like you said, whether he makes the roster or not, I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting. He showed some stuff, I feel like, last year, but like you said, he's so lackluster in the pass game that it concerns you. But one other thing I just want to mention too is that this leaves about $11 million in cap space for us.
Okay.
There could still be some restructuring. How many more moves do you see happening and do you see any other free agency pickups in the offensive line?
Well, I think that this definitely you can knock Lindsley out of the picture now. You can knock any big name offensive line, or really any big name. I think players now I think are going to be less than likely to happen. I think you got to start looking at the second tier guys. But as far as center goes, it makes me wonder if they're targeting a guy in the draft, or I doubt that they're feeling really good about Macari going into it. Right. So I got to imagine that they still have a plan to address the center position. The question is it free agency or draft? I feel like still the draft is more of a crapshoot. So I got to
Mhm.
imagine they're looking to bring somebody in to help solidify the center position.
But I'll tell you this, Glenn, the Ravens time and time again, and we kind of talked about this last show with the edge defenders, they show a lot of confidence in their ability to develop players, right? In their internal development of their guys. And so John and Eric talked about this repeatedly. Off season, off season, off season, off season. These guys are going to need a true off season. I think it's going to be really interesting, and we'll see how much confidence they put in their staff to develop guys and the players that they have. What if they don't take a guy in free agency? What if they don't take a guy in the draft, and then it's really Macari and Bredesen that are the one in, you know, I mean, they're like competing for the spots.
I wouldn't mind seeing what Bredesen has, but you know, we haven't seen it, so it's kind of
Right.
It's kind of scary. I mean,
Definitely.
they could still take a flyer on a guy like Alex Mack. You know, he's old. He's 36. He's been
banged
up and he's been on the decline, but he would certainly be a cheap replacement,
right,
for a guy like Skura. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple other names out there. Nick Martin, I don't think would cost a ton, but yeah, I mean, they're still gonna have to address that position. But man, it feels good to know that now there's 3 locks on this offensive line, and all 3 to me are really good players with Bozeman, Stanley, and now Zeitler. And man, it would be nice to have 4 locks if Orlando was still down to stay here in Baltimore, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go at the center position. Man, it's hard to believe. You know, AQ Shipley is a free agent. This guy's 35 years old. He had a long career, and we remember how he was in Baltimore. But that's just name just jumped out at me. But yeah, I think there's still moves to be made, because I wouldn't have thought they could get this one done at just $7 million a year when you look at what other guys are projected to make.
And
so
maybe the longer that they wait, the less the less opportunities there are for guys, I'm sure the less money they're willing to take. Do you see what I'm saying? So like as the well dries up, if a guy like Nick Martin, if a guy like the center for Kansas City, Reitler.
Reiter.
Is sitting out there, maybe they're able to get him at a more economical deal, because they're like, well, what other options do I have? I don't know if the Ravens are trying to play a little bit of, you know, cat and mouse there to be as strategic as they can with the cap, right? There's no point in going in and overpaying unless you've identified your guy like they did. And I don't think they overpaid for Zeitler, but you know, there's no need you're pulling the trigger too early if you don't need to, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, yeah, I'm surprised they pulled that. They were one of the first people out there. I mean, to go get Zeitler right now.
And I think that was because they didn't want free agency to open on Wednesday, and things, not that he couldn't be signed before, but things really heat up. And then see some market setting deals, and then, you know, Zeitler's stock starts to go up. I think they're like, nah, we're going to get this guy now before all of the craziness happens on Wednesday for sure.
Yeah. And I was always told that the legal tampering period starts today, but doesn't start for another couple hours. I thought it doesn't start until noon today. So I'm kind of interested to see that they got this done a little bit earlier. I'm not sure exactly the timeline on that, but I thought today at noon was when you could start the legal tampering. So, yeah, it's a little interesting that they got it done before that, but
because he was released.
Oh, okay, that's right. Jeez,
you know what I mean? Yeah, okay. You just said that, and then
it's early, Jimmy. You know,
it is. But yeah, he can be signed whenever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, let us know what you guys think. Are you excited? What does this mean for the other guys on the roster? Is there any other moves to be made in the coming days? And yeah, what you think about Zeitler? Are you happy about it? Were you kind of surprised they went right guard to address first, not edge, not playmaker? Not tight end, not wide receiver, not center. Let us know what you guys think, and we'll talk soon.